Well, hello and welcome once again to the DCL podcast, where we're inviting you to sit back, relax, and we'll be on our way shortly. Well, welcome back to the DCL podcast, your podcast helping you and your family cruise a little smarter, and I'd like to welcome back to the show. It's early. How you doing today, Chris?
Pretty good. If my voice sounds deep and groggy, it's just matching the mood of California at this early hour.
I figure half of California is in line at Starbucks right now, or maybe Pete's or someplace else, and you're at home.
I am. So I am drinking cold brew that I made in a Japanese style drip tower that you can try on all 4 of the Disney ships.
I do remember you talking about it, and how has it held up?
I mean, it's delicious coffee, but it is a little bit like jet fuel. Sometimes I drink it too quickly and I feel like my heart might give out. So I just would like to warn everybody that it makes very strong coffee. And likewise on the ships, unfortunately, here's what I find about Cove Cafe. It's not consistent recipes across all 4 ships. So they sort of do what they want and do things different. And on the Wonder, the main barista on that ship right now brews that coffee at like 10 times the strength. It is the strongest cup of cold brew I have ever had. In fact, I even suggested maybe you don't need to do it at such a high concentration. There were other guests literally talking about I can't have coffee today because that coffee scared me so much yesterday. I couldn't stop my heart from racing.
I love it. I think the first time I had Phil's coffee, it did the same thing to me too.
Phil's is just like that. You're right. But Phil's is also easily my favorite chain coffee. I like, mom and pop shops and things like that. But if you're going for a chain, there's nothing better than Phil's.
Well, this has been the coffee talk today on the DCL podcast.
We just hope that Disney's listening because Joffrey's is on absolutely 0 people's list.
Well, we've got an amazing guest today. Excited to bring him back. He's helped us out quite a bit talking about the Star Wars Galactic Cruiser over some recent episodes. And it's been a long time since I know he and his family have been on the ship sailing. But I would like to welcome back to the show all the way down in Texas. How you doing this morning, Dennis?
I'm doing really well, and I am really excited to be here and get a chance to talk about this cruise.
I was excited to see all the posts that you've been putting on Facebook this week or over since you guys got back. Just some amazing pictures of the Disney Magic and all the fun that you and your family had.
Yeah, I've had a great time sharing those. As an aside, it was a little unusual not being able to download the pictures that Disney took for you. So I've had to go through the process of emailing them myself and then uploading them to Instagram and stuff like that. But I've been kind of parceling them out over the past few days, getting my mileage out of it. And I've had a great time doing that and reflecting on the cruise.
Well, before we jump into this cruise, kind of remind everybody, I should have went back and looked at this. When was the last time we had you on talking about one of your cruises? When was the last time you guys sailed?
The last time we sailed was June of 2019. We were on the Wonder for Alaska. And like everybody else with COVID, we've had a half dozen cruises canceled since then, just kept juggling and rescheduling things. So this was a long time coming.
And I'm excited to talk to you about this one because originally we had this one booked with you guys, very maritime cruise out of the Port of Miami on the Disney Magic. And we ended up having to change ours. It was just going to work out better for my parents for sailing with us. So we switched over to the Dream. And we had a great time, but in the back of my head, I was really looking forward to being on the Magic with you guys.
Yeah, it would have been fun. For me, though, it was some great uninterrupted time with my family. My boys are both teenagers, so trying to get their attention and get them out of their rooms when they're home and not at martial arts or doing something at school is a rarity. Getting this 5-day cruise was just perfect for us. It was everything I'd hoped it would be.
Okay, so this cruise left out of Miami is a very maritime cruise, and I want to touch on that a little bit because we haven't really talked about that. This is our first episode we're going to do with a very maritime cruise and kind of what all that entails. But this one left out of Miami. It was a 5-day, sailed to Castaway Cay the first day. You had a sea day, went over to Cozumel, sea day, and then back to Miami. And of course, you got to spend Thanksgiving on board the ship as well.
Yeah, we did. That was different. That was unusual. And it didn't even really feel like Thanksgiving until we sat down for dinner that night. And then it really hit us that that's what it was, especially when there was turkey on the menu, but I'll get into that in a bit. But having an opportunity to be out and explore, I mean, this is the first Thanksgiving I haven't cooked a turkey myself in years and years and years. And we did our own little Thanksgiving a couple of weeks ago, just because I like to do that. But the day was so much more relaxing without having to cook for a half dozen people.
Gotta ask what you do with your Thanksgiving. Like if you had cooked the meal yourself, what would have been on it?
Well, my wife and I divide up the labor. I usually smoke a turkey breast or a couple turkey breasts, depending on how many people are going to be around. Lately, I've got a mac and cheese recipe that I also do on the grill. I smoke the cheeses and then blend that with the pasta. Then we usually have some sort of sweet yam, sweet potato, casserole, stuffing, green beans, and a few other dishes to go with it. Of course, mashed potatoes.
All right. Well, Steve and I will be there next year for Thanksgiving in 2022.
Smoked mac and cheese, Chris?
Yeah, Texas, here we come. I don't know if anybody knows this, but I'm a mac and cheese connoisseur. It's a food group. So I definitely would be excited to try some smoked mac and cheese.
I will put this mac and cheese up against anything. It is an incredible recipe, and I've made it probably 2 to 3 dozen times since I first discovered it.
Well, I don't think I could even emulate it, even if I asked for the recipe, because I don't have a thing to smoke it.
What's funny is I just flew with a guy and we were talking about he smoked cheese for the very first time with the smoker with his father-in-law and loved it. They did some cheddar, but he's hoping to change it up and add some different ones in the future, but they loved it. So,
well, coffee and smoked cheese. That's what our podcast is about now.
All right. So this cruise leaves out of Miami. We don't get to talk to people a lot about Miami. What did you get? You guys flew in the day before, I'm assuming. And where did you guys stay?
We flew into the Fort Lauderdale airport on Southwest because it ended up just being a little bit cheaper. And then I did the trick where I just kept rebooking the flight, and I ended up saving $1,200 from the day that I booked it to the day the flight actually left. So that worked out quite well for us. And then it's about a 35-minute drive from Fort Lauderdale to downtown Miami. And we stayed at the Hampton downtown, I think they call it Bracknell. That worked really well. I mean, we were there for only a limited amount of time. We checked in at about 7:30, 8 o'clock, and then we were gone the next morning by 10. I really liked the location. We got out and we walked around just a couple blocks in either direction, and it was pleasant. It was pretty. Got to see some great views of downtown. They also had some great restaurants right there on the street level that were connected to it. We ate at a place called the Batch Gastropub for dinner. And I only bring it up because, Chris, again, mac and cheese, I know how big a fan you are. And they have a dish there called the Mac Attack. And as far as mac and cheese I've gotten at restaurants, that was very high on my list. So okay. If you're in Miami, check out the Batch Gastropub there. It's also a good place to watch football. They've got TVs for all the games set up if you happen to be there on a Sunday.
All right. Good. Taking notes.
So how did you guys get over to the Port of Miami the next day? What was your strategy there?
Well, I found an incredible deal on a rental car. And so when I priced that out against doing car services and things like that, it was only slightly more. And just so for the extra freedom, I decided to go ahead and rent the car because I knew we were going to have several hours to kill once we got back to Miami at the end of the cruise. And so that was going to give us a little bit of liberty to drive around, do whatever we wanted. So we drove to the port. And our port arrival time was scheduled for 10:30. At the rate we were going to be there at 10:15. And I've heard on this podcast, especially, don't get there early. They'll turn you away. So we just drove around for another 10 minutes or so. We got exactly to the port. We got to the port exactly at 10:30, dropped off the bags at Terminal C, and the porter said we need to park in Garage G. Miami is the most confusing port I have ever been to. We did 3
You can say
laps
that again.
around the port before we found Garage G, partly because there's no sign for it. And we just weren't going far enough down the street to actually find it. But once we did, we parked the car, jumped in the coach, and shuttled back. So we got back to the terminal at about 11 o'clock or so, by the time we finally figured out where we were supposed to be and where to park.
Miami's a confusing port too, because if you stay in downtown Miami, it feels like you should just be able to walk to the ship. It's like so close, but you have to cross this bridge and it's not pedestrian and you end up having to drive or get a car service. When we did our Marvel Day at Sea cruise out of Miami, we literally could watch the Magic sailing in and it was so close, but there's no way to get there unless you have the big confusing runaround all throughout that area. And actually, Steve, am I correct in saying that Disney won't be sailing out of Port of Miami in the future because they signed that berthing contract with Port Everglades?
I need to go back and look at that again. It's not for a couple of years before that happens up in Fort Lauderdale. So the Dream will be moving to Miami initially, and then it
switches to Port Everglades.
That seems like it's the plan right now. Did anything stand out about going through the COVID testing process, Dennis? I don't want to spend too much time on it, but I know we were kind of texting or messaging back and forth.
It wasn't difficult. I had stressed myself out about the process prior to getting there because I have never had a COVID test prior to this cruise. I haven't needed one. I've been largely working from home, been protected, been safe. Like I said, we got back to the Terminal 11. I completely botched the security line. There was a whole bunch of people lined up. They ended up coming down the line, looking at everyone's port and oh no, you can go in, you can go in. So we did that. But then I walked right past the person that was supposed to check our port arrival form. And I was issuing 1,000 apologies this entire time. And then we did the COVID test. It took about an hour to get our results back, and they were doing them in batches. And it was all of a sudden 30 people got up at the same time when they got the okay. And then you walk to the next line to check in. So we got on the ship, I want to say at about 1:30. So it took about 2.5 hours to get through that whole process.
Okay, so you passed your COVID test. It was time to get on the ship. I believe in Port of Miami, you do not enter the ship into the atrium. Is that right?
No, actually we did. We did get on deck 3 into the atrium this time.
Okay, cool. For whatever reason, when we sailed, we were not in the atrium, but I don't know why. So
yeah, I was expecting not to go into the atrium based on past trip reports that I've heard. And so I was a little surprised by that. We were pretty fortunate as we walked up the gangplank to the ship. They closed the door right in front of us. So they did that welcome show, and they wanted to keep the surprise for us, so we weren't looking over someone's shoulder. And then we talked to a guy there who had been stationed on the Fantasy for a long time, and then so he'd just only been on the Magic for a month or so. And then they let us in, and since we were the first family, we got the announcement, which was just amazing. I was telling Steve just a bit ago, I was not prepared to how overwhelmed I was feeling when I finally got on that ship. When you got past the stress of all this added stuff you have to do to check in for a cruise now, and you finally get on the ship, they do that announcement, and it's like, I'm actually here after 2 years plus of waiting for this. I'm finally on board again. And then we got to stand right there in front of the platform where Mickey was to do the welcome show. I know at least some of the ships have been doing both Mickey and Minnie, but it was just Mickey for us. I filmed the whole thing. I've watched it a half dozen times since then. It went smoothly. It was splendid. They got you pumped up right out of the gate for the cruise with all that.
If you end up having just Mickey or just Minnie, they have a rotation where they have to take one of them away to take a break. And then they come back really quickly, and then they take another one away so they could take a break. I think it just depends on what flow, because the last thing they want in this onboarding process is to have any delays. But it's nice. We were also the first through on the Wonder, and it's sort of nice to stand there for like 5 minutes while they bring everyone else in, because you get to just sort of take in the ship and be excited, and then the show starts. So it sounds like you and I had similar experiences of being the first on in our batch and getting to have that moment to ourselves.
Yeah, because we're standing right there next to the Mickey statue in the atrium. So I got a chance to snap a picture of my family with that, and I posted this on social media. That is by far my favorite atrium statue of all the ships I've been on so far. It's just really cool. Really like the way that it looks and the way it sits there in the atrium. And we stayed on that spot, and then they ushered us off to make sure that we all had the app working for the cruise, which we had some difficulty with getting set up for my kids, but there are people that, they couldn't touch your phone. So they had to walk you through it, which it was like, no, go to that screen. No, go back. And now press that. And they got us all set up. And I was really impressed with the app compared to previous cruises. I found it to be far more responsive, far quicker. The only real issue is that you would randomly lose your connection to the Disney Wi-Fi. But then you would notice, because there'd be a bar there that there's no connection or something like that. But I remember when we were on the Wonder for Alaska, we'd send each other messages that would show up 45 minutes to an hour and a half later, and everything was instant this time around. It really helped us out on the cruise.
The technology piece is something that Disney has a lot of room to grow in. Certainly other cruise lines have much faster internet connections, but even intranet just for the ship, I think could be a little more consistent. So I'm hoping that with the Wish, they test out some new technology and then they retroact that to all the other ships so that there's less connectivity issues. But I agree, the app has had quite a bit of improvements pushed to it. So it seems to be an overall smoother experience than it has been in the past.
Well, before we touch on the muster drill, everybody's favorite new part of sailing with Disney Cruise Line, besides that welcome show, being a very maritime cruise, and you guys had that time to kind of take in the lobby. Dennis, could you kind of paint a picture? How did the magic look as far as being decorated for Christmas and the holidays?
It was beautiful. They did a fantastic job. I mean, there's a Christmas tree that spans at least 2.5 decks or so sitting there in the atrium. And then they had the garland all across the railing there in the atrium as well. I counted, a half dozen other Christmas trees around the ship. Wreaths were spaced out throughout. Each one of the restaurants had its own Christmas decorations. And then, of course, they had Christmas music playing on a regular basis throughout the ship. If you came there to get into the holiday spirit, they were well suited to get you there. It was very well done.
Having spent some time in the parks during Christmas, I thought they did just an amazing job. We kind of had that same feeling being on board the Dream during the holiday season as we've had being at Disneyland. So, Chris, I think you're going to really love it when you finally get to go on one of these.
Sounds like they do way more in the way of decorating than they do for Halloween.
I think so. What did you guys do? You guys are back in the Magic for the very first time. Your rooms, I'm guessing your rooms probably weren't quite ready. What did you guys do? Did you guys go explore the ship? Did you go get some food like a lot of people do? What did you guys do that first day, Dennis?
Right. So yeah, the room was not available till 3:00. So we did the much vaunted muster drill, which, as you've all said, and I don't need to spend a whole lot of time on it, it is the way to go. They cannot get rid of this process. I mean, we found the spot, scanned the thing, and then we were off to lunch. We went to Lumiere's and had a great lunch there, watched the video while we were waiting for our food. They're very, very quick service. The cruise had about 1,500 people on it is what our server told us. So it was a little bit more than what I've been hearing on cruises lately. I think he said the prior two cruises had 900 and then 1,000 people. So this was the biggest one that they've had in the States since they returned. But they were prompt, quick service. It didn't feel too crowded. So we did Lumiere's. My wife and I discovered a new rosé while we were having lunch that we absolutely love, that unfortunately, like every time you find a wine on a cruise ship, you cannot find anywhere around here. From there, we explored the ship a bit. We went up to Deck 9. Love the funnel vision. We ended up spending a lot of time on Deck 9. There was 2 tables that we would always try and get that would keep us a little bit sheltered from the sun, where we could see the screen. We watched parts of Moana there, WALL-E, Lion King, Ralph Rex, the Internet. We never sat down for an entire movie. We'd always see movies there and get a lot of snacks from Deck 9, whether it was Pinocchio's Pizzeria or the burger place on the other side. My oldest and I are huge fans of the Dole Whip, so we ate more of those than is healthy. But we had a great time up there. And so we ended up going up to Deck 10. I know the sail away party is not real popular with y'all. I love it. And so I kind of missed it. I just like being up there amongst the excitement. But then I also always love being up on Deck 9 and 10 when the ship actually pulls away from the dock. I love watching sail away, and you get a beautiful view of Miami. We just avoided a storm, but the result was we had these beautiful skies and this enormous rainbow off in the distance. I think it was my favorite sail away so far, just because of the color of the sky and the way of the view of downtown. It gave Vancouver a run for its money. When we were doing our Alaska cruise. My wife had some spa time booked for the cruise, so she went to go find the spa and check that out, and she ended up sticking around for a facial, so we didn't see her for 2 hours after that. But my boys and I had a good time. We'd explored more of the ship. We went back up to Deck 9 and 10 and wandered around and looked around. My kids really, really just like finding out everything they can about the ship and finding the nooks and crannies. And, oh, did you know there's this back there if we go on there in Deck 10? And so we took advantage of that time to do that.
Chris, I think you talked about that sail away out of Miami as well from when you guys sailed. It's kind of an iconic one.
Yeah, it's one of the best because you're sailing literally away from downtown. So there's all these tall buildings. And then to your left are basically like J-Lo's house and all these like giant mansions that have boats where there would normally be cars because they're in their own little like canals, basically. And then it all, like the grand finale is that you sail out right past South Beach. So like when we went, it looked like hundreds of thousands. I have never seen so many people on a beach. It stressed me out, to be honest, but it's cool that you're on your own ship and you can look down and watch it. I would say if they do switch to Port Everglades, you will not have that iconic Miami sail away anymore, but it is really cool. I highly recommend. And also, Dennis, to your point, I have never been inside the ship during a sail away. I've always gone out on deck so I can see the last bit of land and watch it and hear the horn. I feel like that's always really exciting. So I do recommend, if you are a fan of like sailing in general, just the idea of going out to sea and watching the pilot get on and off and watching the sort of ships have to move out of the way because this giant ship is barreling towards them. There's a lot of drama in a sail away, and I think it's fun. So we also like to go and watch them.
Yeah, we like the sailaways as well, to be completely honest. Like you said, Chris, it's just kind of iconic to leave that way. Here's the question I have for you, Dennis. Did you guys have first or second seating for dining?
Second. We always request second. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what we've been doing lately too. And I think that makes it so much nicer because when we've had that first seating, it feels like, you get on, they have the sail away party, and then boom, you got to be hurrying up, getting to your cabin and getting to your first seating for dinner. And having that second seating, it just feels so much more relaxed as you set out to sea. And you can take in all those moments like you just talked about, Chris, with the pilot boat coming up and dropping the pilot off and everything else. To us, we felt like we had like just a really relaxing, the last two cruises, sailaways. And I'm guessing you probably felt the same way, Dennis.
Yeah, we really enjoyed it. I mean, it was relaxing. Yeah, I caught one of the servers going by, grabbed a drink. Like I said, we've been up there doing some snacking. We typically don't eat dinner here until 7:30, 8 o'clock at the earliest anyway, just because, again, with teenagers, their schedules are busy. And so trying to get everyone around the table is something of a challenge. And that only happens later in the evening. And then it just worked out for us. Allowed us to go see Tangled was the show that was on that first night. We went and saw that at 6 o'clock. Didn't miss any part of getting out of Miami. There was 3 other ships that were also leaving out of the port at that same time. I think it was the Edge, one of the Celebrity ships went out by. That was an impressive looking ship. And it was fun waving to them, and they waved back as they passed us. And then there was a Carnival ship, 2 Carnival ships actually. That camaraderie that was not only on our ship, but it was across all the ships, and getting to wave to everybody as you went out was just a lot of fun.
Well, to kind of put it into perspective, so you said 1,500 people on the Magic. That's roughly about 3/4 full for your sailing. For ours on the Dream, we had 2090, so just about half. So if we have some of our newer listeners, kind of give you an idea, perspective of how full the ship was over the holiday weekend. You guys are a family of 4. What did you guys book for a cabin this time, Dennis?
Well, normally we just get a veranda cabin, and we try and get it, at least a floor or 2 above the entertainment and at least a deck or 2 below 9, so that we're not dealing with those noises. We ended up on deck 6, but like everybody else with all the cancellations we had, at one point I had 3 rotating cruises. So I put down a couple deposits and then fully paid cruises off. So I had a lot of credit, which allowed us to do 2 cabins for this one. And so we had connecting rooms. On deck 6, the room host had already pulled back the wall on the balcony so that we could cross and just hang out all together on the balcony at the same time so we weren't crowded. First time we'd done that we had done 2 cabins. It worked out really, really well for us. And I may have created a monster because that's what my boys want now, is they want their own cabin. That's a bit of a budget stretcher. And so I don't know how feasible that's going to be in the future, but it really worked out well for this time.
We're kind of getting to that point too, where our oldest is 15 and he's tired of sleeping on those beds that they have that either come down from the ceiling or they turns into for the couch. But like you said, that's a tough budget one, depending upon what the cruise is that you're going on. But nice to have that extra space in the balcony, and then the door opens. Did you have the door that opened between the 2 cabins? Did you say that too?
We did. Yeah. Now, I will advise, what we found out is that when your host goes into the room, if that door is open, he has to close it because of fire hazards and stuff like that it's really only supposed to be open if people are in the cabin. When you have 2 cabins like that and you've got minors, you have to have 1 adult and 1 minor to each room. So technically my wife and my youngest were in one cabin and myself and my oldest were in the other, but that's not how my wife and I stayed in one, they stayed in the other. So we couldn't, it created an issue occasionally, but fortunately, if you couldn't get into the one you wanted to, you just went through the cabin, out onto the balcony, and then into the other cabin because they never locked the balcony doors.
Yeah, because your keys would be different, right? Because you would have you and your wife would have different keys to the different cabins. Okay, anything else stand out about the cabins? I love the fact that you were able to do that on this cruise.
It's just a minor thing, but I kind of felt like they showed their age a little bit compared to the Wonder, which I was on just 2 years ago. Obviously, the Dream and the Fantasy, still plenty comfortable and adequate. And, I liked them. I think they're still beautiful, but I did just think these look a little bit older than what I'm used to seeing. But again, minor complaint.
Well, we just did the Wonder. I remember Steve was saying like the varnish looks so nice. And like, The like deck is upkept really well. And I agree on that for sure. But when you have a ship as old as the Magic and the Wonder are, it is certainly hard to compare them to a sparkling brand new ship, because there are some things that just are going to show their age. And I think the cabins are part of that. What's interesting to me, though, I don't foresee, because Disney has such a small fleet, I don't foresee them getting rid of the Magic and the Wonder anytime soon. And I know that there are listeners who would revolt if their favorite ships were suddenly gone. But if you look at other cruise lines, ships don't really have a life past about 30 years. You know, Carnival will like sail that ship to another company. Or if you ever go on YouTube, you can watch where they just like purposefully beach the ships and then just leave them there. Like that's how they dispose of a cruise ship, is they just like drive it up onto shore on some island somewhere. And there's dozens of ships on this space. So anyway, I'm not predicting that that's going to happen soon to the Magic and the Wonder, but your point, Dennis, does make me wonder if those ships are due for another, you know, month-long plus closure, where they just go through and completely gut them, put all new furnishings and all new, you know, surfaces, maybe update the internet, things like that. Because I think those are beloved ships. So people are going to want to keep sailing them even past 30 years, but they require a lot of upkeep. So we'll be paying attention to what happens there.
Well, let's jump into food. I know that that's near and dear to your heart, Chris.
I know it is near and dear to my heart. Let's get quickly out of the way. Did you do any specialty dining like Palo, or I guess it's just Palo on this ship?
I tried to book Palo brunch for my wife and I. The reason being is I've never done Palo, and the one time I was on the Dream, I didn't get dinner in me either. I knew, one, my boys would not be awake in time for brunch on a sea day, so that would make it feasible. But it was never available to me. I mean, I don't have a Castaway Cay Club membership to get those opportunities to book it early. And I checked every day to see if there was cancellations. The Facebook cruise group, I just missed a couple people saying, hey, I just canceled this. If someone wants to get it, and it would be snagged before I could get back. So no, we didn't get a chance to do the specialty dining. That's still on our list of things to try on a future cruise. But I wasn't going to do dinner. Again, it's kind of like I was saying earlier in the show, it was just I had my kids' attention, which with the world being what it is right now, when you have teenagers, that can be hard to do. And so I wanted to spend dinner with them. And so that's what we did. We purposely elected not to get Palo for dinner.
Well, you sound like a great parent.
Thank you.
Prioritizing family time over adult time, I think is really noble. That being said, tell us a little bit about, I think I want to separate out Thanksgiving dinner. So let's separate that out. But just general dinners, how did you find the food? Did you have a favorite restaurant in the rotation? Tell us a little bit about that.
So just real quick, our rotation was Lumiere's, Animator's Palette, and then Rapunzel's Royal Table was the last two nights as well. As far as the dinners go, it was pretty much everything everybody says. It was good food. I would find that on an average dinner of the three courses, I thought two of them were really good, if not great, and then one would just be okay. I'm trying to remember what the first night may have been the exception to that. I did the fried brie, the escargot, and the sirloin, and I loved all three of them. But then the last night of the cruise, when we were at Rapunzel's Royal Table and they were doing the show, I got the soup was good, which may have been a corn chowder or something like that. The appetizer was fine. That may have been seafood. But then I got the Flynn Rider plate, which is a pork loin and a piece of pork belly. I was not impressed. The pork loin was way too dry. The pork belly was good. It was just a bit drier than I would typically make it myself. But again, that was typically how the meals went, is that you would get two things that were really delicious and I really loved and would get more of. But then there would be a third item that I just wish I'd done something different.
At least the food's included. So
yeah.
I think even on our cruise, Seth got something that he didn't like and just asked the server, hey, can you bring me like a salad or something else? So that's always on the table, I guess, is my point. If there's something you don't like, you can let your server know and you could get more escargot. Or if you're Steve, you would have already ordered 2 orders. That seems like one of the benefits of having the food already included. So now let's pivot towards Thanksgiving. I'm fascinated by the concept of Thanksgiving dinner on a cruise ship. Christy sailed on some Royal Caribbean ship. I can't remember which one, Independence of the Seas, maybe. She said it was the best meal she had ever had on a cruise ship, which I'm like, in a main dining room, which I'm like, wow, that's high praise. So I'm curious, what was your Thanksgiving dinner like and what stood out the most to you?
It was good. We enjoyed it. It was just weird being on a ship for Thanksgiving. Halfway through the meal, the captain came on over the speaker and led us in a toast. That was really cool. He did a spectacular job. I really enjoyed that. It was a nice touch. I wish I had listened to the episode with Chris from the Concierge Lounge before I did this cruise, because he talked about how good the turkey was. I ended up ordering a ravioli that had a pumpkin base inside of it. It wasn't bad. It was good. I enjoyed it, but I had a bite of my wife's turkey, which was really, really good. I wish I had ordered that instead. It was quite good. Thanksgiving, it was fun to be on the ship. It was just a regular night in Rapunzel's Royal Table for us, as far as, there wasn't really an entertainment or anything going on there. I know a lot of people were very satisfied with the turkey, those that ordered it. One of my boys did as well. And I think he was trying not to tell me that he liked it better than mine, but it was still fun.
And what do they do for dessert? I'm just curious. You mentioned they had like pumpkin ravioli and turkey, which sound very Thanksgiving-y, but what type of dessert? I'm assuming like pumpkin pie, something like that?
No pumpkin pie. A couple different cheesecakes. I think that night I had a Rocky Road ice cream sundae that I liked quite a bit. A lot of the flavors on that meal did include like cranberries and pumpkin and sweet potato type stuff as well.
My son got that ravioli and he loved it. It was like one of his favorite things, but I got the turkey and it was amazing how thick the turkey was, Chris, the slices that they had on our ship. And it was really juicy and flavorful. It was a really good meal, but it was weird. We don't really do much for Thanksgiving, to be completely honest. It's just kind of a day that we spend together. And then generally, if you can get family or friends too, if I'm not traveling. So I didn't really miss that much of it, or that part of it, I guess, per se. But it was kind of a weird day being on board the ship, and it's Thanksgiving. But I think the meal kind of really pulled it all together with us, since I was with our parents, and you being with your family, Dennis. I think it was a good way to cap off the day.
Yeah, and that was our Cozumel day. So, we were already in Mexico, which wasn't celebrating Thanksgiving. And although there was a few people that you'd run into in ports that would remember at the last, like, oh, happy Thanksgiving. And
yeah,
that really got us into the mood that day. I mean, prior to going to dinner, we didn't dress up. We've done formal night once on the Wonder for Alaska, and I wasn't sure whether they were doing it or not. I mean, they didn't have a formal night, but we did dress up just a little bit. I mean, put on nicer shirts and stuff like that. And we went down in front of the Christmas tree and got our picture taken, which is going to be on our Christmas card. So, that was fun. And it was fun. Don't get me wrong. It was just a little bit Thanksgiving light when it came down to it, but I wouldn't have traded it. It was just, I preferred to be there than home.
We did the same thing. We got kind of dressed up for dinner and then had our pictures taken in front of the tree as well. So I think I'm going to have to get your address and we'll send you ours, and you can send you, and we'll exchange Christmas cards this year and see how they turn out.
Absolutely.
What did your kids think about, because your kids are a little bit older, what did they think about Rapunzel's for when they actually did the show?
They liked it. Okay. So on that last night of the cruise, when they did the show, we were in the corner. And we were just to the right of the stage, and there was an empty table between us and the stage. I actually liked the look of Rapunzel's Royal Table, the restaurant. It was my favorite, the way it was decorated of the 3 restaurants that we were there on the ship. But my wife and I had our back to the restaurant itself, so I was mainly looking at one wall, and I could see behind the stage from where the actors were coming in and out from behind the stage door there. This doesn't answer your question, but so that was just a unique perspective on the show. My kids liked it. They've seen Tangled. They liked the Disney movies. They enjoyed that. There was entertainment at all the restaurants, at least one night of something that was unusual or different going on. With having the Tangled show on the first night and then getting the Rapunzel's Royal Table Tangled experience on the last night, it was kind of an interesting bookend to the cruise.
That's interesting. These restaurants were not designed to have shows in them, right? So it's an interesting layout. And I think you bring up a good point that there are definitely some tables that have unique views or maybe less than stellar views of the action. More importantly, I think sometimes they're not really well designed acoustically. So there are like sort of zones where it's hard to hear what's happening, or maybe it's even too loud. I found that in Tiana's. There were times when I was like, excuse me, what? Mm-hmm. And we couldn't really talk. So, and the not to spoil anything, but the show for Rapunzel's is a little more brash and you have a lot of character interaction. Whereas the show for Tiana's is more like, we're going to play some jazz and crooners while you eat, which is a little less distracting. So I could see that. Interestingly, it looks like for The Wish, the Frozen show, the stage is in the very center of the restaurant. And so there probably won't be sightline issues the way there are on the older ships. And it'll be really interesting to see how that changes that. But I think almost universally, everybody wishes there were more restaurants like Tiana's and Rapunzel's because it really is unique to Disney Cruise Line. And it sounds like you enjoyed that show. That was your first time seeing it?
Yeah, this was my first time on the Magic ever. And so everything on the ship was new to me. And I just like the lanterns hanging from the ceiling, the coloring, the oak walls that they've got going on there. It was just, some of those pseudo props that they had set up throughout the restaurant as well. It was just fun to walk into. It was very well themed.
Did they do the lantern finale with the servers?
Yes, they did.
Okay.
In fact, our server was like, "Oh, I'll be right back." He was in the middle of dropping something off and he had to run to the back and pick up his lantern real quick.
Right. Since it's your first time on the Magic, I got to ask, did you or anyone in your party do the aqua dunk?
I wanted to, but the opportunities that presented itself for doing that, it was a bit too cold. I ended up passing, but I was prepared to do it. And I really wanted to give it a try. There was a lot more people, especially the kids, that were more willing to swim and do the water activities on the ship than I was. But, I've lived in Texas now for over 20 years and it's never that cold when it's time to swim. And so it was just a little too cool for my liking for that activity.
Yeah, I could really see that with those of you who live in the warmer climates. It was kind of a cold week that week down there. So even for us on the Dream out towards Castaway, I think we only rode the Aqua Duck once. I think my younger son rode it a couple times, but my wife and I only rode it once. So let's stick with the shows. You guys got a chance to see Tangled that first night. What shows did you guys see and what were your thoughts?
Yeah, they offered Tangled the first two nights, and then they offered Believe the last two nights. I really enjoyed Tangled. I thought the opening act was the highlight of the show. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. Believe was fun. I like the variety aspect to it when they provide so many different songs from different shows, especially, the big Lion King number that they do is outstanding. I always make time in the schedule to make sure we catch the shows, especially their Broadway style productions on those. I think that they're consistently well done. I think some of the especially shows like Believe and Dreams and whatever, the framing device that they use can be okay, but the musical numbers are always worth the price of admission.
Yeah, I agree. On the last show episode that I recorded about my cruise, we talked about that. Like, there's only so much of 30-year-olds pretending to be 11-year-olds that I can handle. But the actual scenes of Disney music are really great. And the Lion King one is really, really epic and certainly worth that. But I think Tangled is a great show across the fleet. I think it's probably one of the top 3 or 4 shows in the whole fleet, for me at least. I do hope that soon enough they get away from doing just 2 shows on the cruise. I hope that they go back to adding a bit more variety, but I understand with the pandemic and the physical distancing they're doing in the theater, it's the only way that they could guarantee that everybody has the opportunity to see each show. So it makes sense for now, but I'd love more variety.
The other thing I'll say about it is that they were seating us in the theater. I'm assuming that's only a COVID era protocol, but I hope they extend that because on previous cruises, there's so many seats that end up empty because someone is saving a seat for someone else who doesn't show up. And so you get stuck several rows back farther because one person's trying to save 12 seats or whatever the case may be. And instead of seating people first come, first serve, they had every other row is empty. That I'm sure will go away, and I'm fine with that. And then they left 3 seats between parties, but them seating people and refusing to seat people that didn't have their entire party there. For me, I really appreciated that they were really not letting people save a ridiculous number of seats for people who may or may not show up.
I totally agree with that. We sent my mom down early to get seats when we went to see Believe this time, and she uses a walker, so it was going to take a little bit longer to get through with the elevator. and they wouldn't seat her until everybody was down there. So I like that aspect of it as well. What other entertainment did you guys take part in during your cruise, Dennis?
See, we did way more on board this cruise than I think we've done on any other cruise that we've been on. Not that there's been so many, but your show has been a great benefit for that regard, because I took notes about things that I wanted to look into this time around. So we did family animation 3 times. My wife and I did 2 tastings. We did the Generations Quest show. We did trivia a couple times. Like I talked about, the Funnel Vision was our usual hangout. We caught a lot of parts of movies there. Encanto, the new Disney movie, debuted on the ship. We got to see that. We went back and saw Jungle Cruise. My boys went and they did get a chance to see Eternals again on the ship. So the days were full. We had entertainment all the time. We made the most of our time on board.
Yeah, you can quickly fill up the days. How was the Generation Quest? Was it a fun?
It was fun. I was expecting something a little bit more like How Well Do You Know Your Family, the show that was traditionally on the ships, but it wasn't that at all. I mean, it was the 2 adults and 2 kids. I think you talked about this on a prior show, but then the kids were asked questions that the adults should know the answers to, and the adults were asked questions that the kids should know the answers to. That was the first 2 rounds. And then they had to rap in the second round. The adults had to rap a song. And then the kids had to perform one of the kids had to do an opera version of, it was a rap Happy Birthday and then an opera version of Happy Birthday. The ladies did a lip sync battle. And so to music that the other would know. It was quite entertaining. It was a fun new show. I didn't know what to expect when we went in there, but I almost went back to see a second showing of it, but we just couldn't work into the schedule.
Yeah, we had a really good time on ours that we went to. Our youngest son's kind of a ham, and he got up there and actually was one of the kids up there. So it was a lot of fun. So if you get some good participants in it, it makes it a really fun experience. Let's see. Let's talk about the kids clubs really quick too. Did your kids are a little bit older? Which clubs did they go to, and did they go to the clubs?
Yeah, they skipped the clubs. The last time any of my boys were in a club was when my youngest was 9, and he would go to the Oceaneers Club back on the Dream, and he liked it quite a bit. But this time they wanted to do the shows. They wanted to do the entertainment. They're kind of introverted to begin with, and so they weren't as excited or interested in meeting other kids on the ship. They wanted to see the entertainment and the things that the ship had to offer. And so they basically stayed out of the clubs.
Our oldest did the same thing too. And I think this is kind of tough if your kids are a little bit introverted, or maybe they're a little bit shyer, which I think my oldest is becoming kind of that way. It's tougher on these cruises that I think over the holidays, we really noticed that there's large groups of families traveling together with kind of built-in friends. And so when he went up to the Vibe, it kind of felt that way, and he just never went back. But we had a great time, to your point, Dennis, had a great time hanging out with him, because we don't get to hang out with him as much. So we had a lot of fun going around. Our youngest, however, spent a lot of time up in the Edge, and he really enjoyed that. What have we talked about on the ship? Anything else that you guys got to
tell you my trivia story.
Okay. Let's hear that.
Because I know you're always interested in the trivia. So we did trivia twice. I'm going to start with the second one because it's not as near as entertaining, but that was the Disney villains quote trivia. And they would give you a quote from a Disney villain. You had to identify the villain and then identify the movie. So there's 20 questions, 40 total points. My oldest and I did that. We scored 16, which was about average. So we were not competitive. The winner had 23, I think, points like that. But earlier in the cruise, we got to do Marvel trivia.
Oh.
It had 25 questions, and we know the Marvel movies forwards and backwards and reverse. Scored 22 out of 25, which tied for first place. So we went to the tiebreaker question, and they asked us, in what year did Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch debut in Marvel Comics? And so you had to provide an answer, and you couldn't go over. Whoever got closest would win as long as they did not go over. And then she told us, if both of you go over, then I'll just pick who's closest. Do either of you happen to know the answer or want to take a guess before I give it?
No idea.
I have no clue on that one either.
All right. So I guess 1965. And
I would have guessed the 70s, I guess is what I would say. Sometime in the 70s.
Yeah. So I was torn on this. I was trying to figure out if it was a 30-year-old or a 40-year-old character, but I guess 1965, the other table guessed 1960. The answer was 1964. So I was closest, but 1 year over. So we lost the tiebreaker. So
no,
one shot at Trivia Glory, and that's how it went down.
But that's a bummer.
Hey, you were in there for the running at the end. Holy cow. I've heard of Quicksilver, but I never knew about the Scarlet Witch. So I had no concept as far as like that.
Yeah. I mean, she just had the WandaVision
right.
shows was what featured her recently on Disney Plus, but I I knew I was close, but that one year, and it was really funny as we were leaving, because we were in one of those booths in the back of Fathoms for the trivia, some random kid is like, I can't believe they lost by a year. And it's like, yes, it hurt.
I know. Way to dig it in, kid. Way to dig it in. All right, let's get off the ship. You guys got to Castaway Cay and Cozumel. How was your day at Castaway Cay?
We had a good time overall. It was unfortunately impacted by wind quite a bit. The ship was supposed to dock at 8:30. I woke up in that morning. We were stationed off the island quite a ways, and we weren't moving at the time. And apparently their first attempt to get in didn't go so well. So they made a second attempt. And then the cruise director, Darren from Scotland, came on and told us about the difficulties that they were having with the wind and the current. And they made a second attempt and got us in sometime after 9 o'clock. We originally had a port adventure to feed the stingrays, the stingray adventure that they have there, and then to do some snorkeling with them as well. But that was at 9. So we were already missing that. Originally, we had planned parasailing, but that vendor canceled a couple weeks ago. So we had to reschedule to this. I had wanted to do the Castaway Cay 5K. But again, with the circumstances being what they were, we joined the queue. We were like groups 20 and 40 between the two rooms, got off like within 5-10 minutes of when they started letting people get off the ship. And we got a message that we needed to report to the Stingray hut in order to reschedule our adventure. So we walked over there. They said, oh, they've all been canceled for the day. And we're like, okay, so what about this? Oh, that's canceled too, due to wind. Most of the port adventures were not available because of the wind, and some of their vendors that run the shops weren't able to make it to there as well. So we backtracked, we wandered over, got our picture taken in front of the boat. I love that. Then there was another station where we could get magic shots. So we collected a bunch of magic shots from the photographer there. And then Mickey was out on the back of a dune buggy. And so we stopped and took pictures with him. You know, there's plenty of beach chairs available because of the reduced capacity on the ship. So we found a great spot under a palm tree, picked out a couple of recliners, stashed our gear there, walked up and down the beach. The water was really too cold to get in. The only people that were in the water were the kids that, you know, will never tell you that they're too cold to swim. So we hung out there, just enjoyed the sun for a little bit. We did some shopping. My wife and I went out to Conked Out, I think is the name of the bar, and tried a couple of the different tropical drinks that they had there. So we spent about 3-4 hours on Castaway Cay, had a good time, and then went back onto the boat. And I think we maybe caught a movie or something like that, hung out on Deck 9 for a while, caught other activities, but had a good time. I mean, we made the most of it. I mean, what can you do? You're in paradise, even though you don't have all the port adventures. It was still better there than practically anywhere else in the Bahamas.
Yeah, it was a tough week out there. It was pretty cool when we were at Castaway Cay too. My youngest got in the water, and I think I got in the water for just a little bit, but that was about it. We didn't quite have the wind that you had, though.
Well, and the other thing about that day, and Chris, I got to thank you for this tip. You talked about the relief bands on one of your prior trips, and my oldest gets motion sickness sometimes on a ship, so I invested in one. And the seas were choppy that night. It caused some appetite problems for both my boys, and especially my oldest. But I had gave him that relief band. He tried it out, and it got him through the evening. Eventually, he got a little bit annoyed by the pulses, and so he took it off. But that really did help out that evening.
I have one, and now I take it with me to the theme parks because it gets me through Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout, which is so much more motion sick than Tower of Terror ever was, because the premise is that you're bouncing up and down with like Rocket controlling it. So it's just way more motion sick for me, but I can get through it with that. So it's probably too uncomfortable to be like a 24-hour-a-day cruise remedy. But I find that once you get your sea legs, you don't even really need it unless it's really choppy. So it literally is like a lifesaver for me. And I'm glad that he found it to be helpful, because everyone I've heard who's tried it has helped them, even if the sea bands that some people wear don't help. But you're right, that tingling sensation is a little annoying after a while.
Yeah, but it got him through the core of the evening, and that's what he needed. So, and he was able to sleep in the next day since it was a sea day. So that worked for him.
Perfect. Well, I'm glad that was helpful. And also, just so everybody knows, if it's windy, very likely the Stingray excursion will be canceled, because the stingrays are actually wild stingrays. It's not like Disney just sort of like owns these stingrays. In fact, when storms come or hurricanes come, they open up that area and let the stingrays swim out to sea so that they can get shelter in deeper water. And then the stingrays will naturally come back because they know there's food at the island for them. But my point is, with wind, if the visibility isn't great or anything like that, or the current's too strong, they just cancel it because, they're wild stingrays and they can sting. And so the excursion, just to be safe, would rather have the waters be very calm and really good visibility. So we've actually never gotten to do that excursion, and we've signed up maybe 3 or 4 times because it rains, or it gets windy. Anyway, you did go to Cozumel as well. Did you get off the ship, and what did you do in Cozumel?
Yeah, we did. I was really looking forward to Cozumel. So we did a port adventure through Disney that took us to see some Mayan ruins, the Mayan Cocoa Company, and then we got a little bit of beach time at Playa Mia Beach, I believe is what it was called. I liked it. I know that there's others I've heard that have done the excursion that weren't impressed because they got to the ruins expecting to see Chichen Itza, which it is not. I mean, these are ruins that a farmer had blasted quite a bit, but they recovered what they could. First time I'd seen any, so I really enjoyed that. They had a lot of wild iguanas in the area too. That was cool to see. The Mayan Cocoa Company was fun. We got to see them make artisan chocolate. We got some samples of that. My wife and I got to try a chocolate margarita, which sounded bizarre, but was actually quite tasty. It was almost the consistency of a milkshake with it, when the chocolate milkshake with some tequila in it, which was quite good. The beach I could have done without. I mean, we only had about an hour and 15 minutes to spend on the beach. It's a much, much smaller area than what you get on Castaway Cay. But if you just want to get in the water or spend some time, the water was warmer. That was the advantage than what we had at Castaway Cay. But I mean, I pretty much just hung out on a lounge chair recliner and just watched the water come and go. My wife and my son got on one of the aqua bikes and paddled around the water for a while, had a great time. Sooner we're ready to hang out on the beach before it was time to leave. But really the highlights of it were the ruins and the cocoa factory.
So you did have to take the ferry from Cozumel to the mainland to see the ruins, or
no? They were there on the island. It was San Gervaso, I believe is what it was. They were called. They were not offering any excursions to the mainland this time around. They had briefly offered Chichen Itza a few months before the cruise, but just as soon as they had offered it, they pulled it. So that wasn't even an option for us.
I've heard that Chichen Itza is a really difficult excursion because you're basically on a bus for 2.5 hours there and like 2.5 hours back. And then you only get to be at the site for about 45 minutes to an hour so that you have time to get back to the ship. Plus you have to take the 45-minute ferry from the island to the mainland and back. So it's basically like 3.5 hours of traveling each way just to get there. But if you can stomach that, which I know I wouldn't be able to with my motion sickness, just be on a bus for that long and a ferry. But if you can, I've heard, obviously, those ruins are amazing.
We decided if we got to Cozumel again, we might try it if it was offered. But on this trip, we didn't want to spend that much time on a bus. And then it wasn't even an option. So it was easy. Right. It was an easy decision to make.
Well, that's what you did in Cozumel. And those are sort of the overall excursions. Is there anything else of note that you want to share about this cruise or the things that you did on this cruise besides those excursions?
Yeah, I mean, this is the first time we ever did tastings on the ship. And so we did the chocolate and liqueur tasting in Keys. And then that was our first sea day. And the second sea day, we did the champagne tasting. Those are fun. I talked about not wanting to spend a lot of time away from my kids, but those are 45 minutes a piece. You get to try some premium beverages. The chocolate and liqueur one was just absolutely fascinating. How it was not just chocolate, there was some cheese involved as well, but how those would influence the flavors of the different wines, port, or champagne that was offered with it. Highly recommend that. I'll do that again on a future cruise. I'll try those tastings. Marco, who was the guy in charge of all the beverages on the ship and then worked up in Palos, was the one that led that. And he was very knowledgeable, did a great job teaching us about all these things. Made me wish I'd signed up for those on previous cruises. But like I said, I'll be definitely doing that one again.
I think the mixology is probably like the gateway to those tastings, but we had Joyce on the Dream, and she's the sommelier for Paolo and Remy that led the champagne tasting. I've always been intimidated by champagne, and it was amazing. My wife and I had the exact same experience. I cannot wait to try the chocolate liqueur tasting that you guys did, Dennis.
It was really eye-opening. My wife and I actually like different types of wines and things like that. And then this helped give us some clues about how we could enjoy the same thing. And we ended up doing a wine package on the ship. And so we were kind of like finding that neutral ground, but now we know some other things that we can try in the future.
Right. And so much history too, especially in the Champagne one that we did. So much history about just like the different operation,
the region.
Yeah, the region, but also just like the actual companies that make the different champagnes themselves. So you finish up with a sea day and then you guys are back to Miami. Nice to have that sea day, at least in my mind, before you get off the ship so you can relax a little bit before your vacation ends.
It was relaxing. It's nice not having to rush back from an excursion or a port adventure of some sort and then throw everything in your luggage and get it out there before 8:30. And especially when you were watching Dreams and then we had dinner that night. And so we packed up really in the morning and talked to our host, and he said, "Oh yeah, just, swing by here and get it out. No problem. We'll take care of that." I was really surprised on that last morning. Granted, the ship was not at capacity, but before it was our turn for breakfast, which was the later one because of the second seating, they were already calling our group to leave the ship. And they had our luggage available for us out there. I've never had that happen. I've usually been waiting an hour after breakfast for stuff, but very, very efficient this time around.
I don't know if they changed the process or like you said, it's just because there's less people, but it seems like it's really easy to get off the ships right now after you have especially that second seating, if you have breakfast there. Well, you guys had your rental car there. What did you guys do before you got back on the plane, Dennis? Was there anything that of note that people might want to do or experience if they're down in Miami?
Potentially, yes. There was a couple things we wanted to do that were closed that we didn't find out about until we got there. We ended up in, I forget the section of Miami it's called, but there's a stretch called the Miracle Mile. We parked there. We went to this large independent bookstore. My wife used to work at what was at one time the nation's largest independent bookstore. So she always likes to check those types of things out. Shopped there for a while, wandered around that district, got coffee, window shopped. We were noticing there was like a half dozen bridal boutiques there. And then it was very, very Miami with the palm trees everywhere, all these neat looking fountains and stuff like that. So we didn't get to do as much stuff as we wanted, but it was better than being at the airport for 5 hours. And so, yeah, because we got off the ship and we were before 10 and our flight was not till 4. So we just had time to spare. Ideally, we could have made a 10:45 flight. I was just not going to push our luck on that by even trying to leave before breakfast. But this was the way to go. It was, we just at breakfast, we got back on the internet because we could get our 5G connection there and Googled things to do in Miami. Because we just neglected to figure that out before we left for the trip. And we came up with a list of things and we just ended up on the third one. And that's what we did.
Oh, perfect. Well, what a great way to kind of end it. You're, wandering around in just that beautiful tropical setting and kind of taking in Miami before you get back on the plane. Well, as we kind of finish up, I know that, I'm going to spoil it here a little bit because I know that you did book an onboard cruise credit. What's next for you and your family, Dennis?
Yeah, I booked 2 because I could, and I'd never done that before. So that was a new experience and it's real easy to do through the app, but we already have a cruise in Alaska set up for June. We have had that one. We had wanted to go to the Mediterranean. Unfortunately, the cruise we wanted is the same week my son's graduating from high school. So that wasn't going to work for us. And then the subsequent cruises, all the rooms we were interested in got booked up by the gold and platinum cruiser. So that just didn't work, but everyone loved Alaska. So we're going back to Alaska in June. And then we just got to talking about how much we enjoyed this time together. And with my son getting ready to go to college, we said, what better way to ensure that we're going to have the uninterrupted time together than to book another maritime cruise? So that week before Christmas, we're getting on the Wish and we're going to go to Castaway Cay and Nassau. So just a 4-night cruise. We're having a hard time coming up with gifts for teenagers. They don't just ask for stuff anymore. I just don't want to keep giving them cash or something. Or get them something they don't want. So we ran it past everybody and they said, yeah, cruise is the way to go. So I priced out an option on every ship, presented it to the family, and we all voted for the Wish, and that's what we're doing.
I love it. Well, what better way to, what better gift to give your family than time together? So good for you. And to get on the Wish too. That's going to be exciting. Another very maritime cruise. So as we kind of finish up, Chris, any final thoughts from you?
No, I don't think so. I'm so glad that you all got to do this. I feel like it's a pretty epic first cruise back to be able to do Thanksgiving and to sail out of Miami and your first time on the Magic. So that sounds amazing.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I will say it's a little weird on Pirate Night seeing a mashup of people wearing their Christmas pajamas and the other half of the people were dressed up as pirates. That was, it was fun. It was strange. We had some good laughs with it. I mean, people looked great, but it was just kind of one of the bizarre aspects of a maritime cruise.
Yeah, it was kind of the same thing with us too. The people dressed to the hill. And one final question, Chris, what we forgot?
What?
Fireworks at sea.
Oh yeah. Did you like the new fireworks show? I
did. I'm not a big fireworks person to begin with, but they offered it 2 nights, which was weird because they didn't have it on the itinerary for the first night at all. But we went up to deck 10. I know people have complained about their lack of social distancing. That wasn't really a thing. It didn't bother me too much, but we got to see it there. We were standing by one of the funnels when we watched it. The next night, though, we watched it from our balcony on our stateroom and had our own little private viewing area to do it. And that was the way to go. So if you're on that side of the ship, that is a great way to see the fireworks.
So they shoot it off, for those who don't know, on the right-hand side of the ship, the starboard side of the ship. And if you are lucky enough to have a cabin on that side with a balcony, you can take in could you hear the music?
Yeah, it was loud enough we could hear it. We could hear Santa talking.
Yeah, so you could hear the music as well. So, well, I guess as we finish up, Dennis, thank you so much for coming back on and sharing your experience with everybody. As Chris said, we're super excited for you and your family to be on this show as well. But before we get out of here, you are a podcast host yourself. You and Jay over there host an amazing podcast focusing on Star Wars. I want to give you the opportunity for people who are interested in Star Wars to come over and join you as well.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. Well, we've been doing Podcast Artists now for 2 years. We have 3 shows a week, usually focusing on news, 1 review episode, and then just some other discussion about whatever we're interested in that week. We just recorded one about animated characters from Star Wars. And then we're getting ready to cover the Book of Boba Fett, which comes out at the end of the month. Please join us for that. You can find it on whatever podcatcher you're using. We should be there.
I am so excited for the Book of Boba Fett. I know Chris is as well, being a huge Star Wars fan. He's shaking his head. So, all right. Well, as we get out of here, thank you so much again, Dennis, for all you do for our show. Thank you for the amazing podcast you host. And we look forward to bringing you back on, if not sooner, but definitely when you get back from Alaska. And I wish you and your family all the best this holiday season.
Thanks so much, guys. I had a great time talking about this.
All right. Cheers. All the best. And we'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Well, that's going to wrap up our show today. Once again, I really want to thank Dennis for coming back on and sharing his and his family's experiences as they sailed over Thanksgiving on a very maritime cruise for the beautiful Disney magic out of Miami. If you're listening to this as it comes out, it is Christmas Eve. For those of you who celebrate Christmas, we want to wish you and your families all the best this holiday season and just a very Merry Christmas. As always, we'd like to thank our Patreon supporters who help bring this show to you each and every week without commercials. If you want to learn more about our program, you go over to patreon.com/DCL podcast and find out all the information there. Well, between now and our next show, if you are celebrating the holidays, getting together for Christmas, on behalf of myself, Steve, Christy, and Chris, all of us here at the DCL podcast, we want to wish you and your family safe travels, be well, enjoy the time you have with each other, and we'll see you next time on the DCL podcast.
The DCL podcast is not affiliated with the Disney Cruise Line, Walt Disney Company, Adventures by Disney, or Run Disney. All of the opinions expressed on our shows are those of the hosts and the guests who appear on the show. If you have any questions about any of these products, please contact the Walt Disney Company.